Folks, thank you for taking time to visit with us today and learn about Rekor, and I'd like to thank our hosts for having us here today. I'm going to have to show you this safe harbor statement. I'm sure you've seen those before. It's on our corporate website if you'd like to read it. But with that, we'll go into the company. So Rekor is really about AI-driven decisions. We like to believe that we're providing faster real-time intelligence for our customers, enabling them to make better and informed decisions, usually resulting in better outcomes. So we operate in two sectors, so commercial and government. And some quick examples on the commercial side. Some of you may have heard about our deal recently with Mastercard for the QSR space or fast food restaurants, but making customer experience better to drive through and making the restaurants themselves more efficient. And we were working on this about a year before the pandemic, but the pandemic has brought more attention to touchless e-commerce and touchless commerce today. So that's one of the things we do. Creating operational efficiencies with access control for gates at parking lots at airports and hotels and office buildings and other places. On the government side, we operate for the most part in public safety, but our main focus is on roadway intelligence. And when you think about Rekor, I'd like you to think about intelligent roadways, smart cities, the Internet of Things, 5G, and all those good things that are coming. So just some of the company's highlights, so some recent historical success. As an example, we have Hyundai built an app to help their customers know whether their vehicle is up for a safety recall. And it's something that we're proud of. They actually found our technology on our e-commerce site, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. We talked about QSR, so we're actually piloting with Mastercard right now at White Castle for their solution. And the company has a global footprint. See a picture there of Monterrey, Mexico, where our company helped Monterrey get a system up to safeguard the 6 million residents there with over 1,000 cameras in less than 2 months and over 8,600 lanes of traffic. So we do have a global footprint. We operate in over 70 countries. On our e-commerce platform, we have about 50 some odd countries there. So some of our customers, as you can see, my computer's not working here. These are some of the names that we work with. So most of those you'll see some police departments, law enforcement agencies, the U.S. Department of Defense. We do some work in tolling, so that's Colorado E470. Verigo is a company in Brazil that developed an app for parking at shopping centers where people pay to park at shopping centers, unlike here in the U.S., but they actually built a loyalty app around our technology. And then White Castle, the partner, and Mastercard, Hyundai, and some of the others that we've talked about here. Those are just a few. So the company spent the last 2 years, Rekor is fairly young, so we think that we look at ourselves as if we launched the company in 2019 in the spring. And our go-to-market strategy has basically got 3 legs to the stool. So first is our e-commerce platform, which you could find at www.openalper.com, where we've got about 10 product offerings. And as I mentioned earlier, we've got customers in over 56 countries, and it's frictionless, it's self-service, sign up, credit card, hundreds of customers operating around the world using all these solutions. And the e-commerce site, OpenAlper, is new. We launched it in the late fall of 2020. So we've really not done any marketing on the site previously. And if you take a look at our third quarter Q, you'll see that we've got fairly robust organic growth and revenue on that site, and we look forward to seeing what it does in 2021. The other 2 ways that we market are first, strategic partnerships, so OEM deals, specialized offerings, and things like that. So examples would be, Hyundai, Mastercard, some of the business that we do in tolling, and other things. And we like to work with large counterparties, and I think we're very proud of the counterparties that have chosen Rekor as their technology partner. And then we operate through a reseller network that we launched in the middle of 2020, and it's growing as we speak, and we expect that to be a robust way for us to sell. We've got about 25, 30 resellers on board. Some are very large and some are small. and that's the sales methodology that Rekor chose to exploit its products. So it helps us accelerate sales by using, resellers' existing customer relationships that have industry expertise, and it also gives us expanded reach, and we like to think of it as a force multiplier. So I'd also like to point out that Rekor has really spent the last 2 years building our platform, not our technology, but the platform to support technology and get out there and grow the business with the mindset that we would go into 2021 and begin to start to scale the business. So we'll talk about one of our products, and I think when I said earlier that I'd like you to think about Rekor being in the business of smart cities and intelligent roadways, but Rekor One is a product that we launched a few months ago, and what it is it's a single system, okay, with multiple missions. So if you think about all the clutter that's out there today, where every place you turn around, somebody's putting something else in the ground. So whether it's a 5G tower, or it's another camera, or it's a pole for some other equipment for traffic management and so forth, what Rekor One is it's a single system that can be used for multiple purposes without having all that clutter. So the same sensors and cameras that are out there using the same distribution methodology can be used by multiple agencies in the same state. So if you think about it being used by law enforcement as one, maybe Department of Transportation another, Department of Motor Vehicles another, and so forth, that's the way it works. The same camera, same back end, same distribution, just different client interface, different set of applications depending on the customer's need. So there are 3 components to Rekor One. So the first is infrastructure, and I think, great timing for that, because I think we all are likely to see an infrastructure spend by our government. It's long overdue, and you just don't spend a lot of money and then turn around and start building roads and fixing bridges the next day. You have to do studies, and you have to do a lot of work before you go ahead and do that. And what Rekor One allows us to do is everything from traffic flow, congestion monitoring, to vehicle emissions. Tonnage calculations are basically how every municipality determines whether they repair, replace, or maintain a roadway. So they measure the tonnage that goes across the roadway, they do a calculation, and that tells them likely when they're going to need to be able to do something with that piece of infrastructure. So we can do that with our tech out there while it's working for law enforcement. It could be, giving tonnage calculations to another agency, replacing the idea of putting a metal box on the side of the road with a rubber hose going across it, and then somebody having to pull, the data out and taking it back to an office and then putting it through some type of process where you come out with a report and you hand it off to the agency. That could all be done in real time now by using Rekor One. Safety, we talked about public safety. So whether it's Amber Alerts for what traditionally people think is license plate recognition, we call it vehicle recognition. So being used to find vehicles of interest, whether they're stolen vehicles or wanted for other reasons, or an Amber Alert where someone grabs a child, that could all be happening at the same time that, again, other things are happening. The last but not least, and probably most importantly, is that our systems generate revenue. And those of you that follow the company will see that we recently launched a program, first of its kind in the United States in Oklahoma, to help them reduce the number of uninsured motor vehicles on their roadways. And in Oklahoma, it's a huge problem, and it happens to be a big problem in every state. Some examples are Florida has over 4.5 million uninsured motor vehicles on the roadway. Other states range from, it's about 25% of the registered vehicles they have, and there are about 15 states that are above 15%, and it's quite a problem, and it creates a lot of friction within the state's law enforcement agencies for local DAs or state attorneys, depending on where you are. So it's generating revenue while it's bringing drivers into compliance, giving them an opportunity to drive compliantly and, frankly, get the monkey off their back and not have the state chasing them for prosecution. And you can find the Oklahoma UVID site, and I would encourage you to go take a look at it, because what Rekor has done there is we stood up a system in 61 days that covers the entire state, and we capture the vehicles on the front end. We have a database that ties directly into the insurance carriers, over 95% of them. So we know in real time whether or not a vehicle is uninsured. As most states have data that's antiquated and they give you a list that may be 6 months old, and you don't want to be sending notices and going after people that are driving compliantly. So we capture the front end, and then we take it through working with the state agency, processing a diversion notice, and then at the back end, providing a site where someone can go to get insurance. And we've been very careful with choosing our partners to make sure that the folks that are getting insurance and driving compliantly will be able to do so at reasonable rates and not get stuck in some assigned pool as the practice has typically been. And the reason I point out UVID when we talk about revenue is because we've stood a program up. When you think about it, once you have that system out there, then it opens up the opportunity to talk to other agencies within the state about all these different things from infrastructure to safety and so on. But, there's been a lot of talk about congestion pricing around the world. New York City had launched a RFP for it prior to COVID, but we're sure that that's going to come back around. So we can do that. We can do license and registration compliance, and then ties right in with parking management and other things. So that's Rekor One, and really proud of this product, and it took us a long time to get it out there, and pleased that Oklahoma selected us. So we've got a bunch of different things going on here. Rekor has over 35 different solutions that we offer, and it may sound like we're doing a lot, but they really come from a couple of proprietary pieces of technology. One is our algorithm that reads video streams, and then the other is our back-end auto notification system that ties in with all these other things like databases for doing emissions and tonnage and other thour And one you can consider a back end and the other a front end. And we do it very efficiently with a very low cost model. And all of our revenue is recurring, so it's liquid. So whether our products are SaaS software or a tightly bundled hardware software package, it's a liquid model, so it's subscription based. And that seems to be where the world's headed. And with budgets tightening and other things, it's hard to stroke a big check for expensive systems, and subscriptions seem to work with government as well as they do now with commercial. So we're constantly filing patents here. So this is an example of 6 recent patents that we filed. All of these revolve around Rekor One, and we've got a great team that focuses on our IP, and that's something that we'll continue to do as we move forward and hopefully develop a pretty robust IP portfolio. Security, everybody talks about security. Every time you wake up, somebody else is getting hacked and something else is happening, right? So, we get out in front of this, and we've done everything that we can to protect ourselves, our customers. On the government side, we have the highest level of security compliance, which is CJIS. That's the criminal justice systems level of requirement for doing business with certain federal agencies and others. And payment encryption, data encryption, database security, data access, and privacy is a really big deal for Rekor. Because when you talk about things like vehicle recognition or license plate recognition, you'll often hear that there are privacy issues with it. But the way we've built our platform is that we have the ability to turn filters on and off so that we can anonymize or obfuscate plate data. So as an example, if we were looking at vehicle emissions, we don't necessarily need to know, the vehicle's plate. So when you have those tools at your disposal, it makes it a lot easier to sell your product to the agencies that you're dealing with. Super management team, highly experienced. I mean, we've been adding people here since April of 19 when we were about 50 people. Now we're approaching 150. And we've got a pretty sizable engineering department of over 50 people. And frankly, our engineering department is where the future is. And we've got some great people there. Chris Kadok joined us in March of 2020. Matt Hill, the brilliant young man who developed OpenAlper that we acquired back in 2019, is our Chief Science Officer and moved to Columbia here with us. and our CFO, who joined us in May of 2019, and a pretty impressive group of people beyond that. And, Scott Rutherford's a leftover from the old Breckford days way back when, which is the foundation this company's built on, but he's one of the brightest guys I know, and he's just, he's got it together when it comes to putting, these hardware, software packages together. So a great team, no single points of failure, and a super corporate culture, which I can tell you, having been doing this for a lot of years, culture will kill a company, especially a young company. So we've got the right culture. So that's Rekor in a nutshell. And with that, I think we can open it up to some questions if there are any. So thank you.
Thanks, Robert. Really nice presentation. This is Joe Gomes of Noble. We're going to start the Q&A session now. If you wish to ask a question, please click on the lower right corner of the video window. Robert, I just want to go back to the Oklahoma announcement. Maybe you could talk a little bit more, how long was the sales cycle? What was the winning formula to win that business? How competitive it was? Is there an ability to add additional services into the state? For the state, when you're selling these types of systems, what's kind of the payback period, for the state to make this type of an investment?
So, Joe, those are great questions, and I appreciate you bringing it up and giving me the chance to talk a little bit more about it. We started talking to a half a dozen states at the same time that we started talking to Oklahoma about Rekor One and about the idea of revenue generating products, which give you the ability to deploy a system at no cost to the state. And that's the beauty of it, Joe. It literally gives the state the ability to solve a problem and not have to write a check. And very similar to what used to be with legacy businesses like red light and speed that people hate, understandably so. Operates much the same way insofar as there's a diversion fee paid by folks that are driving that are uninsured. It happens to be $174 in Oklahoma. That fee, when you pay that, gives you a period of time to get insured and become compliant. And that's a big deal because in all 50 states, driving an uninsured motor vehicle is illegal, and in some states, it's a pretty serious violation and can be a felony. So when Oklahoma decided to go forward, they put out an RFP. It was responded to by Rekor in September of 2020, and the RFP process was about 2 months, and they awarded it in November. We had committed to have a system up and running by the beginning of Q2, and we had the system up and running the first week in January, so 84 days early. It's interesting, but since our getting cameras installed and deploying the system in Oklahoma, we've had some interest from other agencies within the state to look at other things using the same system. So we haven't even been out there, pitching that yet, but people see the value of it. And the answer is, with respect to other states, sure. I mean, there are 50 states that have this problem of uninsured motor vehicles. And, what it does is it drives up the cost of everybody's insurance in the state, and it creates a lot of friction within the state's prosecutorial infrastructure. So in certain states, they're called DAs, and others state attorneys, but they have to deal with all these cases around uninsured motor vehicles, and they end up spending 20 to 30% of their time on uninsured motor vehicles, problems and cases. So you take the friction out of the system when you do that, and you're giving a person an opportunity to become compliant, and you're doing it in a way where, they're not being forced into an assigned pool for that would require high insurance premiums and other things. So it's really a fair program. So we've gotten some interest in this with other states, and it's out in the public domain, so I can talk about it. But the state of Texas just introduced a piece of legislation that would mirror what Oklahoma is doing. So then once that happens, you get into the RFP process, and there were others that bid on Oklahoma, And the reason that Oklahoma chose Rekor was first and foremost that we were a single provider of a turnkey system where other potential vendors came in and had to team with other companies because no one other than Rekor did the whole thing from front end to back end. So that was important to Oklahoma, and also that we were domiciled in the U.S. So we see lots of opportunity for the Oklahoma contract to be replicated across the United States. And I liken it to the old days of lotteries when, you know, there was a lottery or two here and there, and then over a period of time it rolled out into, you know, initially 20 states and then 30 and then close to 40 states. And I think you're going to see the same thing happen here. And the main reason for it is because then the system can be fractionalized because, you know, once the system's up and running for the uninsured program and it's being paid for by that program, other state agencies now have the ability to acquire software that gives them the ability to use that same platform that we installed in Oklahoma for the other things that we talked about with Rekor One. So we see a bright future with it. The business model for Rekor is that we get paid a fee from the diversion notice. In the case of Oklahoma, it's $43.50 per notice. But we also share in the insurance premium commissions on the back end. And the reason we do that is because we didn't start out wanting to do that for economic reasons. We did it because we wanted to make sure that people get rated properly and they get, you know, the best possible insurance quote as opposed to being thrown into an uninsured pool. So lots of opportunity with the program and with helping to roll out Rekor One in its entirety with that. So.
Okay, thank you for that very detailed answer. And I know, like here in the Oklahoma situation, you know, it's revenue enhancing for them. But given what's happened here with COVID in a number of states and the budgets that the states themselves have had, has that been any bit of an obstacle? And when you're out there, you know, knocking on the government's door about, you know, your systems?
Well, it's the opposite, Joe, because the systems are revenue neutral to the state. They don't have to stroke a check. They just simply decide to implement the system, and it pays for itself out of the revenue through the program, through the diversion notices. So, you know, it's basically a violator-funded system. So if you think about, you know, intelligent roadways and smart cities, there are companies out there that are, you know, proposing smart city platforms that can cost tens of millions, in some cases hundreds of millions. And, you know, what Rekor One does, UVID's a piece of Rekor One. So when we talk about Oklahoma, it's just one use of the same system. Nobody's writing a check. So our customer doesn't have to pay for it. It's being paid for through, you know, the program. So then when it's expanded to other agencies within the state, they can acquire software for other applications at prices that are de minimis based on the usage. So it's a really neat way of moving towards smart cities and intelligent roadways without having to pay for it. So that's the big difference.
Okay. And you talked about, you know, the software as a system model. You know, generally you're talking about a recurring revenue type of a business there. You know, where are we today in terms of, you know, the percent of revenues that are recurring, and where do you think the business goes to over time?
Well, the majority of our revenues are recurring, and if you look at our public filings, you'll see in the MG&A a chart that shows the dollar value of what we call performance obligations, which basically are remaining payments left on subscription agreements that we have with our customers. So when you're selling products that are either SaaS or liquid, where it's subscription based, you can have a 5-year contract, but you can only book the revenue monthly, right? And in some cases, the customers prepay a year, they can pay monthly, however they pay, but you book the revenue monthly. So if you look, and we've only been doing this for, you know, a short time, you'll see that the that number is growing, and it grows significantly every quarter. So that's a good metrics for seeing how the backlog and how our recurring revenue is growing. Because theoretically, you can shut the company down today, and that revenue would just continue to come in for the next whatever years those contracts are out there for.
Right. And if you were to look at the capital needs of the company, how do you feel where you are? Do you think you need additional capital for expanding the business? Are you pretty confident in where we are today from a capital structure?
The company has no debt. We were able to clean up our balance sheet in June of 2020. So having a fairly pristine balance sheet, we've got enough cash to sustain our operations and continue to grow. The only reason that we might look for capital would be if we saw, an opportunity for an acquisition that were highly accretive. And we're in a space where there are a lot of companies around the world that have a lot of infrastructure and what we might consider real estate that have systems up in cities already, so you have access and power there and other things, and perhaps where we can push our technology out through what they already have. And some of those companies have taken decades to build that real estate, right? So if we could find synergistic acquisitions that give us the ability to leverage the real estate that those companies have, we might consider raising some capital for that. But they would have to be highly accretive and make sense strategically. But otherwise, the company has what it needs to continue to scale.
Great. Let me take one here from the audience. They'd like you to discuss your ownership profile, float, liquidity, and I'll throw this one in there, but what you think of the current stock share price.
Well, you're never going to meet a CEO that's not going to tell you that their company's undervalued. Okay? So I'm going to have to, make sure that it's 100%, because I think that, given the assets Rekor has, the being in the right place at the right time, I think the company is undervalued, and I think we've got a long way to go. And some may look at it and say, wait a second, if you go back 20 months, your stock price was, $1 a share, you're $10 a share. Come on. Well, there are companies once in a while that come along that, scale and grow and have stock appreciation that continues at that level for quite some time. I'm hopeful that Rekor's one. We have significant inside ownership. So I myself and my family are, I think, the largest shareholders in Rekor, and believe strongly in it. And I'm here for the long term. And we've got a lot of ownership within our team. All of our team members here have equity in the company, whether it's through options or restricted stock units or primary stock that they've acquired or gotten through the years. And we've gained in the last few months some fairly decent-sized positions with some credible institutions. And that's a great thing, because Rekor did not go public traditionally through an IPO. And the company was created by virtue of a business combination with a company that was already public. But I want to be careful in letting everyone know that Rekor was not a reverse merger into a public shell. So it was a decision that we made to acquire something for its technology. And we realized at the time that by doing so, we would probably be creating a public entity that might be a bit premature. And what I mean by that is that, when you don't IPO a company, you tend not to have the appropriate sponsorship and analytical support, coverage. You don't really have a currency because the stock doesn't trade as well as it needs to for it to be a true currency and for people to feel comfortable investing in it. But we made it through all that. And I think if you sit and look at Rekor today and you look at the institutional ownership, it's starting to get significant. The volume of our stock is trading much better than it was a year ago. I think it's trading at a level that one might consider that it's close to being a currency, but it's still early. And Rekor is a discovery stage company that's not on the radar screen of the majority of the investment community because it has not yet been properly introduced through an IPO. And maybe at some point in the future that'll happen. So this is a great time for for folks to think about following the company and perhaps investing in it.
Great. So I got a couple more questions from the audience. First one is, can you explain how the White Castle Mastercard program works? Is my Mastercard billed when I go through the drive-through lane?
Really good question. So when I first heard about this and Mastercard reached out to Rekor, I didn't really understand why Mastercard wanted to build a solution, thinking wrongly that this would only work for people that have Mastercard. Well, I learned a lot about Mastercard. I didn't realize they were a $300 billion company. I didn't realize they were that big. I also didn't know that they have a group within Mastercard that develops technology solutions for the industry that they're mostly involved with, and which is retail. So Mastercard chose us to supply vehicle recognition for a solution that they are developing, but we are one of several technology providers, including SoundHound doing voice recognition, including Verifone providing smart menu boards, and others providing other AI there that work with the menu boards. So Joe, what happens is the idea is twofold. The first is that it will be touchless. So you'll be able to drive through a drive-through and not have to take out a credit card or a debit card or cash, and it will be pay by plate, so to speak, because your vehicle's being recognized. And remember, we can recognize not only the plate, but we know the make, model, color of your vehicle. So if somebody wants to go, get a hamburger from McDonald's, they're going to have to, if they want to copy your plate, they're going to go have to, steal a car that's identical to yours. So that second part, authentication, is what's really helpful for Mastercard. But it's Mastercard's solution, and they are selling it to the fast food industry. And just to give a sense of scale, there are 270,000 drive-throughs just in the U.S. alone. And we believe Mastercard, will have significant penetration in the next few years into not only drive-throughs here in the U.S., but around the world. And the goal is to make it more convenient for customers not only to pay, but some intuitive menu boards that kind of maybe know what you had last time. It's cold out, so, here, do you want a hot chocolate? The other things that just make the experience better. But on the restaurant side, it has to create efficiency, right? So what we've learned about the QSR business is that literally every second is very meaningful, especially when you're talking about large enterprises that may have several thousand corporately owned stores. So if they can save 10 seconds off every drive-through experience, then across their chain, that results in a lot of economic savings to the store. So we were really pleased to have been chosen by Mastercard to provide the tech for them, because they had other alternatives, and I'm certain back when they did it, they were probably a little nervous about a small company like Rekor, given such a big task, given the magnitude of what the program could be, but they decided to go with us. So I think they just really like what we have.
Okay. And then one follow-up on the Oklahoma from the audience. They'd like to provide kind of the math behind the revenue opportunity. What's the estimated number of notices you expect on that contribution in 21, 22?
Sure.
How to frame the overall revenue opportunity in 2021 and 2022.
So assuming that it's just Oklahoma and it doesn't expand beyond Oklahoma, Oklahoma has several 100,000 uninsured motor vehicles on the road. And our goal as that of Oklahoma's, is to reduce that to a steady state of 10%. So if you were to take a number of 500,000 in 3 years, we want to get that 500,000 down to a steady state of 50,000. So we want to get the other 450,000 vehicles compliant. So the Rekor receives $43.50 every time we get somebody through the diversion program by sending the notice out and getting them insured. And then we share in 25% of the insurance commission off the premium. And if people are rated properly and if they're underwritten, which we insist on with our partners, that they're underwritten not on their credit score or not on the fact that they were, you know, uninsured, but on their driving record, because I don't understand why credit score has anything to do with someone's driving record, but you know, that's the way it is in some states. You know, the average premium would be $1,000 to $1,200, and the average commissions are like 20%. So Rekor would get 25% of that on a recurring basis. So, you know, maybe you could, you know, maybe a little bit more than double the $43.50, and you know, closer to $100 per, per successful diversion. So you can do the math on that, and then you know, folks can look around. There's plenty of public information on. If you just Google number of uninsured motor vehicles in the top 10 states, you'll see that, you know, if you go across the country, it's in the tens and tens of millions. And we believe that as the program rolls out, our goal would be the same in every state, to reduce it down to a steady state of 10%. And the program would operate pretty much the same way. So that kind of gives you a roadmap for the revenue. And, you know, we hope that we'll see several more states here in 2021 and maybe even more in 2022. You know, these things have a habit of having a watershed moment. So we've seen this with other things, like in school bus stop arm, where you electronically enforce somebody driving by a extended school bus stop arm when they're stopped letting kids off. A few years ago, there were only a couple states that allowed that, and then there was a horrific incident a couple of years back in the Midwest, and then 17 states adopted legislation to allow that literally the next legislative season. So, you know, that's, if you think about the need for revenue, because our program can generate tens of millions of dollars for Oklahoma. So not only are they not paying for the system, but they're getting the benefit of taking the friction out, and also when, you know, they're strapped for cash, they're getting, you know, a lot of money into the coffers for their budget. So we think it's got some real potential.
Great. Well, Robert, that's all the time we have for today. Really appreciate you taking the time here for NobleCon17. Great presentation, really interesting company. We really look forward to seeing how the company evolves from here. Thanks again.
Thank you, NobleCon. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it, everybody.